A soldier in eastern Ukraine picks up a Russian rifle that was abandoned in a trench. He racks the bolt, aims at nothing in particular, pulls the trigger, and it jams. He laughs. Not the nervous kind. The kind of laugh that tells you this has happened so many times it stopped being surprising. That moment was filmed in early 2026. It spread everywhere, and it tells you more about the state of Russia's military in 3 seconds than most analysts manage in 3 hours. Russia started this war in 2022 with the second largest military on paper, a nuclear arsenal that supposedly made it untouchable, and 4 decades of mythology saying its weapons were brutal, reliable, the real deal. 4 years later, it's borrowing missiles from North Korea, buying drones from Iran, and fielding tanks that were designed when Brezhnev was still alive. Brezhnev died in 1982. Those tanks are older than most of the soldiers driving them. The question was never whether Russian weapons were bad. It's why a country with this much money, this much history, and this many engineers ended up here. And the answer in 2026 is uglier than anything we knew when this started. To understand how Russia ended up here, you have to understand what it used to be. The T-34, the AK-47, sold to 106 countries, still the standard infantry rifle for armies from Mali to Myanmar. These weren't just products, they were an identity. Soviet engineers had a genius for building things that worked under brutal conditions, didn't need a PhD to operate, and could be manufactured in enormous quantities without a pristine industrial supply chain. That was the whole doctrine. Build it tough, build it simple, build it by the millions. It was brilliant. It also became a trap. Because when you build a military culture around mass production and good enough, you never develop the institutional muscle for precision. The sensors, the networking, the software integration that defines modern warfare, none of that gets funded because none of that fits the doctrine. You get very good at building a lot of the same thing, and you completely stop asking whether that thing still works in a different kind of war. NATO took the opposite path after the Cold War. The US Air Force stopped asking how many F-15s it could build and started asking what a single F-22 could do that 50 F-15s couldn't. The result is a force that's smaller but operates on an entirely different level of technological sophistication. Russia looked at that and called it American arrogance dressed up as strategy. 40 years later, Ukraine is proving the West had a point. One destroyed T-72 at a time. When Russia sent its armored columns toward Kiev in February 2022, the T-72 was doing most of the dying. The T-90 was the prestige option that was supposed to change everything. The T-14 Armata, the wonder tank they'd been promising for a decade, didn't show up at all. By 2026, the T-14 is still nowhere. Russia has produced somewhere between 20 and 50 of them, depending on which estimate you trust, and none have seen meaningful combat deployment. For context, the US has over 2,500 M1A2 Abrams in active service. Germany fields the Leopard 2 in multiple upgraded variants that have actually been shot at and survived. The Armata remains a parade float with a gun, 20 to 50 units in a decade of production. Germany exported more Leopard 2 upgrades to foreign militaries in 2024 than Russia has T-14s in existence. Meanwhile, Russia has now confirmed losses of over 3,500 tanks since the war began. According to Oryx's documented equipment tracking, which only counts visually confirmed losses with photographic evidence, meaning the real number is higher. The T-90, which was marketed as Russia's elite frontline tank, has been destroyed in Ukraine by Javelin missiles, FPV drones, artillery, and at least once by a Ukrainian farmer with a tractor and extremely poor impulse control. The cope cages, those improvised metal grills welded over tank turrets that looked like someone raided a garden center, were supposed to defeat top attack munitions. They didn't. NATO built Trophy, an active protection system that kills the incoming round before it touches the hull. Russia welded a garden gate over the turret and Everyone called it engineering. The barbecue nickname wrote itself. Russia has fired well over 10,000 missiles into Ukraine since the war began. That sounds terrifying. The context is what makes it embarrassing. Early estimates from US officials put Russian cruise missile failure rates at up to 60% in the first months of the war. Ukraine's air defense, which started the war as a patchwork of Soviet leftovers and borrowed Western hardware running on institutional desperation, now intercepts the majority of incoming strikes on defended targets. That's not a boast. That's the Ukrainian government's own reported interception data, which independent analysts broadly support. But here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. By 2025, Russia had burned through so many of its domestically produced precision missiles that it began relying on Shahed 136 drones from Iran and KN-23 ballistic missiles from North Korea. This is not a secondary sourcing arrangement. CSIS confirmed in early 2026 that North Korean-supplied munitions have become a meaningful component of Russia's strike capacity. Think about what that means for a country that spent decades marketing itself as a Tier 1 weapons exporter. The Kaliber cruise missile, launched from ships and submarines in the Black Sea, was Russia's prestige precision weapon at the start of the war. The estimated circular error probable on the Kaliber is somewhere between 3 and 10 meters under good conditions. The Tomahawk, its American equivalent, operates under 1 meter in its most recent variants. That gap is enormous in practice. Russia's missile hits the building next to the target. The Tomahawk hits the specific window on the 3rd floor that you designated 12 hours earlier from a submarine. And the Kaliber costs roughly the same as a Tomahawk to produce. That's not a tactics problem. That's not a training problem. That's an engineering failure they've been shipping for 20 years and calling world-class. Russia has the 2nd largest air force on paper. 4 years into the war, it still hasn't used it properly. And that baffled military analysts in 2022 just as much as it baffles them now. In the opening weeks of the war, Russian aircraft flew low, dangerously low, to try to avoid Ukrainian air defenses. Several were shot down by man-pads, shoulder-fired missiles that any competent air force trained specifically to avoid. Pilots were apparently not briefed on what Ukraine's air defenses could actually do to them. Squadrons lost aircraft to threats that Western mission planning would have accounted for before the first sortie was even authorized. The Su-57, Russia's flagship 5th-generation stealth fighter, has made a few limited appearances firing standoff missiles from deep inside Russian airspace. It has not operated over contested Ukrainian territory, ever. Russia has roughly 30 of them in service as of early 2026. The F-35 program has delivered over 1,000 jets to 9 different nations. The Su-57 has been delivered to exactly one nation, Russia, in numbers that a single U.S. fighter wing would find embarrassing. A U.S. wing typically operates 72 aircraft. Russia has 30 Su-57s total for the whole country. Aviation expert Chris Bolton pointed out back in 2022 that the Su-57's radar cross-section is comparable to the Fa-18 Super Hornet, which is not a stealth aircraft. The F-35's radar cross-section is roughly 1,000 times smaller. Russia built a stealth jet that shows up on radar like a bus. A very expensive, very underperforming bus. The FAB-1500 and FAB-3000 glide bombs have become the workhorse of Russian air attack precisely because sending jets anywhere near Ukrainian air defenses is a death sentence. It's creative in the way that wearing a raincoat inside the building because the roof leaks is creative. Russia entered the war with the Black Sea Fleet as a genuine strategic asset. It exited 2025 having lost roughly 40% of it to a country with no navy. Ukraine doesn't have a navy. What it has is shore-based missiles, aerial drones, and sea-surface drones that cost roughly $400,000 each, against warships worth hundreds of millions. The exchange rate has been catastrophic for Moscow. The Moskva, the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet and a symbol of Russian naval power in the region, went down in April 2022, hit by Ukrainian Neptune anti-ship missiles. Russia initially claimed it sank due to an onboard fire. Ukraine released targeting coordinates. The fire story quietly died. By 2025, Ukrainian maritime drones had pushed the Black Sea Fleet back so far that Russia relocated much of it to Novorossiysk outside Ukrainian strike range. The fleet that was supposed to blockade Odessa and threaten amphibious landings is now hiding in port. The Admiral Kuznetsov, Russia's only aircraft carrier, has spent most of the last decade under repair after catching fire in the dry dock. Twice. It has been technically operational for approximately none of the war. A French Charles de Gaulle carrier conducts flight operations continuously across multiple deployments. The Kuznetsov catches fire in harbor. The French carrier has a flight deck. Russia's carrier has a fire department. Russia's naval doctrine was always built around coastal defense, not power projection. The fleet was never meant to fight the kind of war Ukraine forced it into, which is the cleanest explanation for why a country with 0 warships has been winning the naval war for 3 years. Stay with me on this one. It starts absurd and lands somewhere much darker. In 2022, a Russian soldier called his mother from the front and asked what he needed. Body armor, he told her, because what the army gave him was, and I'm not making this up, designed for paintball. Replica equipment with no ballistic resistance whatsoever, delivered through a military procurement system so riddled with corruption that nobody apparently noticed or cared until soldiers started dying because their chest plates couldn't stop a pistol round. Russia announced in 2017 that it would deliver 200,000 sets of Ratnik 2 body armor to its forces. By October 2022, Forbes reported those sets had not materially reached frontline troops. Instead, a convicted captain was caught selling 56 sets on Russia's equivalent of eBay. That's the part that got prosecuted. Nobody knows how many sets quietly disappeared into someone's garage and never got prosecuted at all. Soldiers were left buying their own protection from civilian suppliers. By 2025, this hadn't been fixed. OSINT researchers reviewing captured Russian soldiers' equipment noted continued inconsistency in armor quality. Some units were well equipped. Others showed up with gear that belonged in a tactical paintball venue. At least in paintball, nobody's actually trying to kill you. Ukraine's situation moved in the opposite direction entirely. Western equipment brought NIJ Level 4 helmets, proper ceramic plate carriers, and body armor that would actually stop a rifle round. The basic thing armor is supposed to do. Not every Ukrainian soldier has it, but when Russia's soldiers are shopping on civilian websites for their own protection and Ukraine is receiving NATO standard gear, you don't need a spreadsheet to know which army is better equipped to survive. Russia's share of global arms exports collapsed by half since 2017. India, their biggest customer for decades, stopped answering the phone and started calling Dassault. The international arms market watched the same videos you just watched, drew the same conclusions, and canceled the orders. That's the market's verdict. Now here's the one that actually keeps Putin up at night. Nobody can answer this definitively, and that's the problem. Russia claims roughly 6,000 nuclear warheads. It has made nuclear threats multiple times since 2022, consistently enough that NATO established specific escalation thresholds in response. Putin has used nuclear language as a diplomatic tool so frequently that Western analysts started calling it nuclear signaling, essentially treating it as noise rather than signal, which is either a sophisticated assessment or a catastrophic misread, and the terrifying part is we won't know which one until it's too late to matter. What's less discussed is maintenance. Nuclear weapons are not shelf-stable. The tritium used in thermonuclear warheads has a half-life of 12.3 years and requires regular replenishment. Conventional explosives used as primary triggers degrade. Electronic components age. Russia has 6,000 warheads in the maintenance culture of a Soviet-era apartment building. The US spends billions annually just maintaining its existing warheads, not building new ones, just keeping the ones it has functional. Russia has not publicly demonstrated that level of investment. Given the fake body armor, the jammed rifles, the wonder tank sitting in a warehouse, asking whether Russia's nuclear maintenance has suffered the same institutional rot is not paranoid. It's the question the Kremlin would really rather you not ask. task. What we do know is that a country handing out paintball armor and running out of precision missiles 2 years into a regional war has not exactly demonstrated the institutional discipline you'd want managing 6,000 nuclear warheads. Before we close this out, the Russian weapons suck framing is mostly right, but not entirely, and the part where it's wrong actually matters. Russia's electronic warfare is genuinely good. Ukrainian drone operators have said Russian EW jamming is one of their most persistent problems in the field. The Lancet loitering munition has killed a meaningful number of Ukrainian artillery pieces. The glide bomb campaign works specifically because those weapons are cheap enough to produce in bulk and big enough that near misses still flatten buildings. None of that is nothing. What Russia has built in 2026 is a war machine that patches holes. Sensor blindness gets papered over with bodies. Precision failure gets answered with sheer volume of fire. When domestic production runs short, Pyongyang fills the gap. That's not a military winning through superiority. That's a military on life support, borrowing the IV drip from countries that couldn't put a man in orbit. Russia spent 30 years and every ruble it could find building a force meant to project global dominance, and ended up running supply requests through Kim Jong-un. For a country that once put the first man in space and built the rifle the whole world copied, that's not just a military failure. That's a civilizational one. The soldier in that trench at the top of this video laughed when the rifle jammed. He laughed because he knew. He's been fighting these people for 4 years. The mystique is gone. Russia's weapons were never as good as the myth said they were. The difference in 2026 is that everyone knows it, including the countries that used to buy them. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what's actually happening on that battlefield, drop it in the comments. And if you want to see how Ukraine is actually exploiting every one of these weaknesses in real time, that video is right here.